morning. Welcome to Kingsport News Hour for the second day in the eighth month in the 16th year of Cheongi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk Moon. And Hak Ja Han at this hour is in jail. She has received a warrant of detainment is what it's officially called, and the Western press is referring to this as an arrest warrant. And I guess it fits best in that definition. But in Korea, an arrest warrant is they can only hold you for a couple, 3 days. It's more kind of an emergency situation, whereas a warrant of detainment is much more long term. And now the court accepted the court actually worked until 3 in the morning before they finally issued the warrant. And one commentator was commenting, they were expecting the warrant to come out at about 1 in the morning, but they were wondering about the other 2 hours, the extended 2 hours, and they realized that Wonju McDevitt was not given a warrant. The prosecution's application for her warrant of detainment was rejected by the court, and so she went free. And so this commentator was saying that, okay, they must have spent those extra 2 hours arguing over whether or not to detain Wonju as well. Anyway, she is free within the confines of the country. I don't think she's able to leave the country right now, but she's not in jail. She was released from the jail once the court decided to reject the prosecution request for her warrant. But Hak Ja Han is in jail, and the next step for her is the indictment. Remember, she has not been tried. She has not yet had a trial. This is a pre-trial situation still, and so the next step is an indictment. And then once the indictment is handed down, then the next step after that will be the trial. And then, of course, the trial will end with a guilty or not guilty verdict. And at this point, it's pretty academic, though, I think, about whether she's going to be guilty or not guilty. I think well, I'm not sure the justices in Korea is actually blind, for one thing. But anyway, I'm not saying she's innocent, but I have some experience observing the justice system in Korea, and I would say that it's not necessarily blind. And then after the verdict, and for the sake of discussion, assuming that she gets a guilty verdict, that she will be given a sentence, and then she will begin to serve that sentence. And the speculation in the media is that she will receive a minimum of 10 years for the bribery and so forth, and there are other charges being tacked on as well. So a minimum of 10 years. And so given the fact that she's 83 years old now, she could well be spending the rest of her life in jail. And even the prosecution has found a way to get the Las Vegas gambling into the picture. See, they had evidence of this, or the police were given evidence of this some time back, not recently. But number one, that evidence, the police destroyed the evidence. They said they kept it for a while, and then when a decision was made not to continue the investigation, and then they destroyed the evidence. They said according to policy. Number two, even if they had not destroyed that evidence, it would be beyond the statute of limitations. But where there's a will, there is a way, especially if you are a government and if you have all sorts of lawyers. So the police investigation was stopped because someone told the Unification Church that there was a police investigation going on, and someone then reached out and stopped the investigation on who actually did that. But that's not that's beside the point of what I'm about to make right now. So the prosecution is saying, well, if Hak Ja Han received a report that the police were investigating her for gambling, right, then perhaps she was involved somehow in stopping the investigation. Maybe she gave instruction. Maybe she said something to someone about stopping. So if so, then the statute of limitations on basically subverting justice or destroying evidence, that statute of limitations is still alive. I mean, it has not passed. And so now even the Las Vegas gambling is in the picture, kind of in an indirect way like that. So they are leaving no stone unturned to go after her. Now, the king has released a statement on this, and but you know what? Let's go ahead and go through our routine, and then I'll get to the king's statement in just a minute. Anyway, he has released a statement on the arrest of his mother, Hak Ja Han, and I will read that for you. And um, people who would like to have a copy, you can you can write me or you can email to me. And my email is very simple. It's tcelder@gmail.com. All right, so let's go through our usual routine. Worst things get, I think the always the more important it is to keep the routine. Right now, Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 64 degrees and cloudy, 77 for a high today, rather cloudy and humid with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm. Tonight, 64 for a low, overcast with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm. And in father's hometown of Cheongju, North Korea, cloudy and 64. And then low of 60 degrees tonight, cloudy with showers, some heavy late. Tomorrow, cloudy and not as warm, passing afternoon shower 2, high of 71. And at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, my goodness, right now, 56 degrees. Oh my goodness, high today. Wait, is this right? Oh no, 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 no. I'm sorry. This is not Texas. Okay. I was wrong, 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 wrong. This is the Chunungung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania. Okay, that makes more sense. 56 degrees, mostly cloudy. We'll get to Texas in a minute. I'll bet it's not 56. And humid with some sun, then turning cloudy, a couple of afternoon showers and a thunderstorm, gusty winds and small hail can accompany any thunderstorm. High of 79 today. 62 for a low tonight, warm and humid. Thunderstorm this evening, followed by a shower in spots late. And then the Limestone County, Texas, Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, 73. Well, that's still not so bad. And clear, but today, a high of 97. Sunny to partly cloudy, hot and humid. Tonight, increasing cloudiness, warm and humid. A couple of late night showers and a thunderstorm, low of 75. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 72 right now, mostly clear, getting down to 70 tonight, low clouds and humid. Tomorrow, high of 84, cloudy and humid, a thunderstorm in parts of the area in the morning, followed by a little rain in the afternoon. Suncheon Palace in Korea, right now 71. And let's see, mostly clear, mainly clear tonight, 60 degrees for a low, partly sunny and pleasant, high at 77 tomorrow. And then Ilan, South Korea. I'm sorry, Ilan. What am I saying? Taiwan. Yes, that's where it is. Ilan, Taiwan is currently 82 degrees and low of 79 tonight. Currently, periods of rain ending in 28 minutes, it says. Anyway, 82 degrees right now with a shower and 79 for a low tonight. Cloudy and warm, breezy this evening with a couple of soaking showers, followed by periods of rain and a thunderstorm late. And we have a typhoon passing us by. It's not even the center of the typhoon is not even close to us, but we're on the sort of the outer edge rain band. Occasional morning rain tomorrow and a high of 92. Yes, that's more like it. 92, yes. All right, let's go to Father's Word, which is over here. And where are we right now? We are in the life of true filial piety. Okay. And I think that's a very appropriate heading for what's going on right now, because who is really the filial son, the filial child, right? Okay. Uh, okay. You are a filial child only if you are able to okay uh, more to those things you don't like than to those things you do like. So a person who will um, sacrifice even the precious love of his life in order to be a filial child to his parents will be able to go anywhere in the heavenly world. And if there is a uh, gate of pearls of 12 gates, then none of those gates will be closed to him. They will all be opened. When our child Hungjin went to the spirit world, Jesus was the old Christ and Hungjin was the new Christ. And that was decided when he went to the spirit world. And so it is thus. Yeah, this is just one of the places where Father mentions Hung Jin, who, of course, the second child between two father and Hak Ja Han, who died in a traffic accident, sacrificing himself, in other words, turning the car another car was coming into his lane from the opposite direction on one of the parkways in upstate New York. When it was clear that the car was going to strike his car, he, instead of turning the wheel, he was at the wheel, he was driving the car, and instead of turning the steering wheel so that he could have a possibility of saving himself, he actually turned the steering wheel the opposite way so that he died in the accident, but his friend who was in the seat next to him survived. So, Father, and also because of the timing of this situation where Father was in Korea, he was speaking at an anti-communist or victory over communism rally in eastern Korea, and um, that was a situation where Father's life was very much in danger, and so uh, Father has given or Father has said that Hung Jinim has a very special position in spirit world. And if you look at the Chonsongyong, I invite you, if you have not seen this, to go to the section on, I think it's called a Spirit World, True Parents Family, I think it is, where he talks in several places, several quotations about Hung Jinim. And one quotation that really sticks out in my mind was where he says that Hung Jinim is the first person ever to go to spirit world in the direct dominion position or in the direct dominion. And he also says something similar to what he just said just now, which is that as far as the spirit world was concerned, the arrival of Hung Jinim in the spirit world was the second coming of Jesus. That was the second coming for the spirit world. This is, Father says something to that effect. So Hung Jinim has a very special position, and I think it behooves us to know about that. Okay. All right. So let's go to the King's statement, and I will read this for you. And I've sent this to all the continental directors, and I believe Richard is going to put it out on his mailing list. I don't know if he's already done that or not, but anyway, even if he has, perhaps some of you are not subscribed to his mailing list, so I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. Statement on the arrest of Mrs. Hak Ja Han Moon, September 22nd, 2025. I am following reports of the arrest of my mother, Mrs. Hak Ja Han Moon, by Korean authorities. Unfortunately, this was prophesied by True Fathers 3 kingships 12 years ago till now, and this is only the beginning of the judgment. From September 2012 to February 2013, and continuing to January 2015, I desperately pleaded with my mother not to deviate from the course set for her and all humanity by True Father Hak Ja Han Moon, but she could not be reasoned with. She changed the name of the monotheistic God, Hananim, to a ditheistic Hanul Pumonim. She falsely declared True Father, the Messiah and returning Lord, to have been born with original sin, and that she could remove his original sin by their marriage because of her sinless birth. Never in the history of the Unification Church was this taught. She replaced the True Father's canonical texts with her own text, which he commanded could never be touched or altered. She betrayed True Father by enacting a coup against his three kingships, which True Father personally crowned by his own hand in three different crowning ceremonies while on the earth. In short, she created a new shamanic religion centered on herself as God while exploiting True Father for his image and name. True Father wrote when he selected me, I didn't anoint myself as his heir, successor, and representative body, that any other that tries to rebel against him, claiming succession, is an Idanja Pokpaja, heretic and destroyer. Nobody knew at the time, but now we can see that Hak Ja Han, my physical mother, has become one such heretic and destroyer, a biblical harlot of Babylon, and is being judged by True Father, who sits on the throne of God in heaven. We lost everything when we made it clear that we would not participate in the traitorous betrayal of our True Father. We were driven into the wilderness course, scorned and defamed as unfilial, cursed and hated. But by the grace of our Father in heaven, true believers in our True Father started gathering, and I formed the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary. My Chinese calligraphy, True Father wrote for me in Korea while he was on earth. Now, thousands have returned to True Father's authority, despite us having scarce resources, because they love True Father, not money and resources. However, my mother's heresy and those who profited from aiding the Han heresy have lost God's blessing, and judgment has come to her rebellious organization that has betrayed the Lord. Both the Korean and Japanese governments have cracked down on her heretical organization. As a practice, we pray every day that Hak Ja Han, my physical mother, repents of her horrendous and hideous sins against the True Father and returns to True Father's authority as a regular member, just like Choi Sung-gil after she failed at the first True Mother's position. True Father has already selected the perfected True Mother, Kang Hyun-sil, his first South Korean and most loyal disciple, to serve True Father's three kingships as she finished her earthly mission to perfection, rejecting the Han heresy, losing everything, but serving with fidelity and loyalty until her ascension. She is now the real True Mother in heaven, beside our True Father. If Hak Ja Han, my physical mother, does not repent before she dies, her soul will suffer eternal torment and separation from the love of God. True Father, true torment and separation from the love of God, True Father. And this I truly dread. We at Sanctuary have had a 12-year ongoing prayer every day for her and those that profited off of her lust for glory to repent of their horrific sins against the True Father of heaven and earth. We praise God in our loving Father in heaven for enacting justice against this evil heresy, proving once again that He is the returning Lord. He is just but merciful, and He is calling the lost sheep back to His flock. True Father's three kingships continue to march forth to the true Cheongguk and the new Jerusalem for the glory of our True Father in heaven. Glory be to the Lord Jesus returned, our True Father of heaven and earth, Hak Ja Han Moon, and his victorious, perfect bride, True Mother Kang Hyun-sil. Onward, Hyungjin Moon, second king of Cheongguk. And then up at the bottom, I put my name as a contact where people can contact me if they have any questions or about this statement, or if they want to return. Although I hope if people do contact me and want to return, I'll be referring those to the Continental directors concerned. Okay. So I sent this to continental directors and also to some other people that are kind of on my mailing list, a few other people. And anyway, I hope it gets out to as many members as possible. Um, I'm not sure I'm not sure how the people in the Family Federation are going to react to this, and that's really not our concern. We need to. Our job is to set forth God's word and Father's providence, and those who want to respond can, and those who don't want to respond positively don't need to. But the thing is, though, that eventually the king and his lineage is going to win, and that is well, that's for certain. And Father said many, many times, "What is it that God wants? Does He want money? No. Does He want power? No. Does He want knowledge? No. What does He want? He wants love." And again, Hak Ja Han and Family Federation leaders say, "We've got the money. We've got the power. Okay. We've got, we've got the knowledge. So therefore, we're the Orthodox." But if you want to deny Father's teaching, and okay, that's what they're doing. They are denying Father's teaching, and so at least they're consistent in that way. But it is the thing that if you look at the history of religion, um, it's not the ones with the money and power that went out. I mean, the Catholic Church had money and power in the Middle Ages, right? They had lots of money, they had lots of power, and lots of knowledge as well. But what Father really needs, what God needs, as Father says, is love, people that He can relate to. So the interesting thing is, right now, of course, the Family Federation is trying to portray Hak Ja Han as a sort of a martyr for religious freedom. But as you can see, she's a traitor to God, traitor to God's providence, and so she's A, not a martyr, and B, not a Christian. I don't know how the Christians in Korea feel about this. I haven't heard anything from them, but this is the group that they've always castigated as being non-Christian, and now they're being sort of lifted up or she's being lifted up as a martyr for Christianity and the persecution of Christianity in South Korea. Now, it is true that the leftist government in Korea is beginning to persecute Christian churches, conservative, evangelical Christian churches. That is true. And somehow Hak Ja Han is able to sort of lock onto that and kind of, I guess, claim herself as being maybe the first martyr or something like that. But other ministers also have been investigated, and search warrants have been executed against them. And the charges are, supporting Yoon Sung Yeol's attempted coup d'état. And Newt Gingrich, bless his heart, is still sort of fighting the fight for Hak Ja Han. And here on Fox, and I believe this is yesterday, right? I think this is yesterday. He was speaking on the Kudlow show on Fox Business, and Kudlow did not even ask him about religious freedom in South Korea or anything like that. But all of a sudden, Newt Gingrich, they were talking about the Charlie Kirk Memorial and about the sort of revival of Christianity in America and the revival of free speech in America and so forth and so on. And Kudlow starts to end the segment, and Gingrich, so wait a second, I have one more thing that I want to say. and that is that we've got this country, South Korea. He named South Korea that is persecuting Christians, all sorts of Christian groups. One of which, okay, one of which has this 83-year-old woman as its leader. He does not name the group or name the 83-year-old woman, but you and I know who that is, right? One of these persecuted Christian groups in South Korea has an 83-year-old leader woman who has now been locked up in a North Korean style situation. So um, I think, first of all, uh, Gingrich is um, right for all the wrong reasons, I guess is the best way to put it. He is pointing out that there is persecution of Christians, conservative Christians in South Korea, but conservatives in general in South Korea. But to sort of rope in Hak Ja Han into that, I think is a stretch. But he is apparently close to the Washington Times, and I think folks at the Washington Times probably have been approaching him, asking him to say these kinds of things whenever he gets a chance. So anyway, that's what's going on there. So um, it's uh, I'm sure it must be difficult for her right now. She's been in jail now for about 24 hours. Um, and so she's had probably about 3 meals now, 3 jail meals, and wearing the jail, whatever costume they give their prisoners to wear. Uh, and I don't know if she's in a solitary cell or with a group. I don't know about that, but whatever the situation, I'm sure she's having a hard time adjusting to it. No, she of course is uh, can reach back to her experience as a child or as a teenager and in her early 20s when she went through some very economically difficult times with the country of Korea at large and also with other members at that time. But I think she has become, I'm sure, accustomed to something quite different, and so I'm sure it must be very difficult for her to adjust. Now, last night, um, uh, and as I think I mentioned before, the court decision was handed down about 3 a.m. And so a lot of Family Federation people were sort of outside the jails or praying, were doing all sorts of singing and praying and so forth. And then sort of when the court decision came out, they were sort of praying prayers of repentance and how, oh, our true mother is carrying the cross that we should be bearing and this kind of thing. So obviously, the Family Federation is trying to keep their organization together, keep it intact, um, and we will see. The Family Federation today put out a statement of apology to the nation, saying we humbly accept the court decision, and we will cooperate with whatever investigation still has to occur. And this statement was not in Hak Ja Han's name, but it was in the name of the church. So already it looks like the church is sort of moving away from Hak Ja Han, and we will see what will. There can be all sorts of speculation on what the leadership is going to look like in the Family Federation in the near term. But as far as the government is concerned, they are moving on now, and they are moving on to other targets. And Hak Ja Han is in the bag, and some others are in the bag. So now they are going to target the Conservative Party, which I mentioned yesterday. And they've come up with this idea that the Unification Church, under Hak Ja Han's direction, may have influenced the uh, presidential election that was won by Yoon Sung Yeol, and even the primary process within the Conservative Party was influenced by Hak Ja Han. And we'll see whether they actually bring um, charges on that kind of on that. And if they do, then this will imply that they are seeking to actually disband the Conservative Party to, take away its corporate status. Now, as a matter of context, political parties come and go quite often in South Korea. I can't even count the number of political parties there have been in existence since the country was first formed in 1948. And usually, what happens is that you first have a man or woman, I guess, in one case, um, and then people gather around that person, and then that gathering becomes a political party. So political parties tend to be very sort of a personality centered, right? And then there have been all sorts of names, and one of the laws, though, is that you cannot use a name that's already been used in the past. And uh, so now political parties are getting kind of creative in their naming because all the all the easy names have been used, like Democrat, Republican. So, for example, the Democratic Party in Korea right now is called, I think, in Korean anyway, 더불어민주당. So the Together Democratic Party. I think they have something else in English. And then the Conservative Party is called 국민의힘. In other words, the power of the citizens or power of the people. I think it's English they use people. People's Power Party, I think they call it. But power of the citizens or power of the people party. And that's their name. So um, I'm not too so the fact that the Conservative Party may go out of existence is not such a big deal because conservatives will simply come together with a different name. However, I do see a trend, as Gingrich is mentioning, that South Korea is sort of slowly drifting into a communist dictatorship, and maybe not so slowly. We'll have to see. As I mentioned before, the liberal, the communist or the leftist party right now has a large majority in the legislature, but not quite large enough that they can start the process to amend the Constitution. They need a two-thirds majority for that, a supermajority for that. And they're just a few seats short of that. And what they're doing, though, is that they are going after individual members of the legislature, perhaps 10 in number, as many as 10, to charge them with having co-conspired or conspired with Yoon Sung-yeol in his coup d'état, which they are labeling an insurrection. And if they can do that, then those people will lose their seats, and then eventually the leftist party will have a two-thirds majority, enough to start the process to amend the Constitution. And we'll see what kind of an amendment they have in mind, but it's not going to be a good one, I can tell you that. All right. All right, so I already talked about that yesterday, so let's not dwell on that anymore. Okay, but that is something that we need to watch out for. And just in general, I think um, you know we've read about the Chinese Communist Party infiltrating Taiwanese society in order to take over Taiwan without firing a shot. And we see South Korea so leaning towards the left, and there is a very strong conservative movement in South Korea. It's just that they aren't strong enough, and I'm not sure, but they may be getting weaker instead of stronger. We'll have to see. But Father, of course, always emphasized education. He emphasized VOC education, and that was done during the 80s, but then it stopped in the late 80s when Kim Dae-jung became president, and suddenly the South Korean church leaders decided they wanted to suck up to Kim Dae-jung. So it's unfortunate, but that is the direction in which things are going right now. So basically, Trump needs to hurry up. He needs to hurry up in bringing down this Chinese Communist Party. Right? I know there are all sorts of things going on domestically in the U.S., but the thing that has to happen right now is the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party. We need to keep our eye on that ball. That's the ball. That's the ball, and that's where we need to keep our eyes to bring down the Chinese Communist Party. Or I guess I'm supposed to be saying uh, political Satanism. I'm using a VPN, so it's okay. Yeah, the Chinese Communist Party's influence is such that the king is actually not able to call for the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party here in Taiwan. He's calling for the downfall of political Satanism, and he's telling us that when we speak online, that we should call for the downfall of political Satanism, not for the downfall of the CCP. I think I can go ahead and say this because I'm okay. I've got a VPN. Okay. All right. So um, that's that. All right. So let's go to some other stuff now. Let's start with the situation with autism and Tylenol. I mentioned this yesterday, I think towards the end of the broadcast, and I also mentioned that Trump was going to talk about Tylenol, and sure enough, that's what he did. Um, and I want to cover this using a story from Al Jazeera, and I picked Al Jazeera because the pharmaceutical industry has such a hold on U.S. media. I don't think we can trust any U.S. media to talk about um, pharmaceutical medications in any kind of honest way. Uh, and I think the COVID-19 crisis uh, illustrated that very well, right? Because the pharmaceutical industry spends so much on advertising. So that's why I saw this article on Al Jazeera, a markedly non-US, non-European uh, outlet, but we'll see what they have to say here. President Trump has urged pregnant women to avoid taking Tylenol, pointing to an unproven claim that links the painkiller to autism. So immediately they use the word unproven. Uh, but see, speaking from the Oval Office with Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., Trump claimed that acetaminophen, the main ingredient in Tylenol, also known as paracetamol in most parts of the world, was no good and should only be used in pregnancy when there's a high fever. Now, unproven, of course, we know that medical research and any kind of scientific research is done where the money is. And I think this kind of thing could only be proven if the studies are funded by the company that makes Tylenol. I don't know who that is right now, but obviously the company that makes Tylenol is not going to fund that kind of research, right? They're only going to fund research that says that Tylenol is really great. I think I've mentioned to you a few times, I'll mention it again now, that before I joined the church, immediately before I joined the church, I was an employee of a global pharmaceutical company. And one of the drugs that I'm sorry, pharmaceuticals that I was selling is still in use apparently as a go-to um, thing for certain indications. There I go with my spiel. And my job, my company would send me scientific studies. And they would send me a whole bunch of scientific studies. And every one of them, of course, said that our drug was great. Our drug was great. And it's great for this reason, that reason. And they all had, double blind, all kinds of, that kind of study. And my job was to meet doctors. And I did that every day. I would go around to doctors and I would sort of be nice to the nurse, and she would send me in between appointments, between patients. and I would sit down with the doctor, and I think the doctors probably saw me because I'm a kid, right, just out of college. I'm talking to people who have medical degrees. Anyway, I think they saw me just to sort of take a break from the patients. But my job was to then present these scientific studies to the doctor and tell him, see, you need to be prescribing more of our stuff and less of brand X. And not only that, but you need to be prescribing our stuff not only for the kinds of patients that you're doing now, but for other patients, patients who have these other symptoms. You should be prescribing our stuff for them as well. So that's how the pharmaceutical industry works. They do studies that are going to show that they've got great stuff, and so the fact that this connection between Tylenol and autism is unproven does not at all mean that it's not true in my mind because of my experience. Okay? And who's gonna fund that kind of a study? Yeah. Speaking from the Oval Office with RFK Jr., Trump claimed that acetaminophen. Okay, so only in a high fever. All right. He then outlined steps his administration would take to restrict the use of the drug during pregnancy and comments laced with unproven and in some cases false claims. Here is what he said and what the facts say about the drug autism and whether Cuba, as Trump claimed at one point, does not have autism. Okay, well, let's see what this is. Al Jazeera, and I think let's see if they actually wrote their own story. Let's go to the bottom here. It's a long article about autism, and they go to great lengths to show you that what Trump said is absolutely not true. But it looks like they wrote their own story. Okay. All right. Okay. What did Trump announce? Trump opened the event by calling autism a horrible, horrible crisis. The meteoric rise in autism is among the most alarming public health developments in history. There's never been anything like this, Trump said, even though the experts point out that the data on autism only captures increased diagnoses, not necessarily a rise in the incidence of autism itself. So, this is how statistics can be manipulated. There's the saying, what is the saying? Lies, damn lies, and statistics or something like that. So this is, they can say, well, it doesn't, they'll always say that. Whatever statistics you give them, they will always say, well, these statistics don't really say what you think they say. Trump then laid out his administration's plans to tackle the crisis. He quotes, first effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of let's see how we say that, acetaminophen, is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism, he said. He went on to warn that Tylenol use during pregnancy should be avoided unless absolutely necessary. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It is not good for this reason. There are strong recommend. They are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary. That's, for instance, in cases of extreme high fever that you feel you can't tough it out, you can't do it. I guess that's what there's for that. Now, to be clear, and we need to give a sort of a stipulation here at the bottom of or maybe of the screen or something. The second king also recommends against using Tylenol, not only for pregnant women, but for everybody. Because Tylenol, uh, he links Tylenol to liver disease. And I have a feeling this is actually, there are people who abuse Tylenol. In other words, they take more, maybe much more than what's on the label in the bottle. But uh, so I think as I'm not giving general medical advice, all right? It's been a long time since I gave medical advice. Since I stopped giving medical advice to actual MDs. I don't give medical advice anymore. But yeah, if you can find um, non-medical ways to reduce pain, and that's great. And hey, listen, pain management. This is a very critical thing. All right. I mean, I had an instance once. Well, I won't go into personal stuff, but just say that pain management is a critical thing. Yeah. And uh, uh, we need to, as a society, and the pharmaceutical industry is not going to do this, but the society as a whole, I think, needs to find non-medical ways to deal with pain. And sometimes, headache or pain, depending on the level of pain, can be stress or something like that. But when you get to higher levels of pain, of course, well, once you get to those higher levels of pain, Tylenol is not going to do much good for you anyway. But, so anyway, yeah, I guess this is one where we have to do our own research and make our own decisions there. Okay. All right. Let's see. So that's President Trump's announcement yesterday. Um, let's do this. We talked about South Korea already, but let's do this one on South Korea. And I'm not okay. Okay, here. South Korean president who's in New York right now, attending the UN General Assembly, says his country can't afford Trump's demands, and this is the line now that the government in Korea has been repeating quite a lot. And this is a story on MSN.com, which of course is a leftist site. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung said in an interview with Reuters that his country cannot afford to meet President Trump's demands, that it invest $350 billion into America in exchange for the removal of punishing tariffs. Without a currency swap, if we were to withdraw $350 billion in the manner that the U.S. is demanding and to invest this all in cash in the U.S., South Korea would face a situation as it had in the 1997 financial crisis, Lee told Reuters through a translator explaining the demands would plunge the country into a financial crisis. And the crisis in 1997-98 was quite severe for South Korea. Its currency collapsed, and it had to call in the IMF, and the IMF put down some very stringent conditions, and a lot of South Korea's assets, especially its banks, wound up being sold, or at least large pieces of portions of equity in the banks were wound up being sold to global banks, and that situation continues today, right? Where global banks own large pieces of equity in South Korean banks, and of course, because there's been so much development of the South Korean economy since then, these global banks have made a lot of money as a result at the expense of the Koreans who suffered during the 97-98 crisis. And so even now, it's called the Koreans refer to it as the IMF crisis. It's actually the Asian financial crisis because the IMF didn't cause it, but it's the Asian that which started in Thailand and affected other Southeast Asian countries and also affected Korea. Basically, countries that had high levels of debt in dollars is what happened. Okay? And then when their currency collapsed, they couldn't repay. They couldn't purchase the dollars to repay the loans, which was the problem that they had. Um, so IMF forced a lot of changes on them, and as a result of those changes, by the way, South Korea weathered the 2008 uh, housing crisis in America quite well, or relatively well, I would say, but yeah, quite well. Okay, but if every time the president brings up the IMF crisis, or what people here know as the IMF crisis, then people sort of freeze. I think so kind of like bringing up 9/11 in America. Okay. Reaching detailed agreements that guarantee commercial reasonableness is now the central task, yet it also remains the biggest obstacle, Lee said. So he's basically saying that President Trump or also the Commerce Secretary are being unreasonable, and that so overcoming their unreasonableness is the biggest obstacle right now. Is what he's saying. Trump said Korea's investment projects would be selected by him, and the country would have discretion on how their money would be used. Lee said Lee also said many in his country were angered by the harsh treatment workers at a Hyundai battery plant in Georgia faced during a recent immigration raid, warning it could make other companies wary of making investments in the United States. And that is true. And something needs to be done about that for sure. You know, if they're supposed to make investments, okay, but to run those investments, they need certain people with certain skills to go to the United States. But many times they're not able to get the proper visa to go, either the State Department or the embassy in Seoul, uh, either too slow or just not issuing the visas at all. And so they just say, okay, well, go anyway. We'll work it out. We need to run that investment, but then they get arrested like this, and then put in chains, and shackles like prisoners of war, and that really hit the South Korean public opinion very hard, and that really plays into the hand of a shall we say U.S. skeptic. I won't quite say. I'm not going to go as far as to say that they're anti-American, but at least a U.S. skeptic administration right now, one that is not really interested in helping the U.S. work itself out of any sort of messes that they create in their relationship with South Korea. And by the way, President Trump still has not named a ambassador to South Korea, and I don't know why that is. Uh, I'm back. Okay, I'm back. I'm back. Okay, I think I was just cut off. Okay. So he says, President says, am I still sharing? No, I'm not. Okay, let me share again. Let's see, where are we? Okay. Um, I do not believe this was intentional, and the U.S. has apologized for this incident. And we have agreed to seek reasonable measures in this regard, and we are working on them, he said in the interview. So Lee is taking the high road here, kind of the patronizing position, I would suppose, and say, well, I know it's not intentional, but they apologize to us, so it's all okay. But it's not okay actually under the surface. When asked if he would walk away from America's demands, Lee said, "I believe that between blood allies, we will be able to maintain the minimum amount of rationality." So he's saying that Trump and the U.S. are not maintaining the minimum amount of rationality. He's choosing his words carefully. Okay. And by the way, he met, after this interview was published, he met Larry Fink and the people from BlackRock, and he met some other sort of hedge fund type people in America. So perhaps they will come up with the 350 billion. I don't know. I'll have to see. I guess something is being done there. Okay. Uh, anyway, we'll see. Of course, right now we're getting towards the end of September when leaders from around the world gather in uh, the gather in New York to speak to the UN General Assembly. Okay, is this someone trying to reach me? Is the tech team trying to reach me? Are you trying to reach me, tech team? My phone keeps beeping. No, okay, all right. All right, so that's that. And we'll have to see, because Gingrich is right that the Korea is sort of a sliding into a communist dictatorship, uh, especially if they start amending the constitution. All right, let's see here. And well, this is another story having to do with Korea and Japan and U.S. Okay, but this is about the Taiwan Strait. This is in Seoul. The four ministers of South Korea, Japan, and the United States expressed concern about increasingly frequent destabilizing activities around Taiwan in a joint statement issued after their meeting. Yeah, well, of course, the three also expressed strong opposition to unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea. In other words, China's nine dash line, which I hope you're familiar with at this point, and attempts to enforce such claims, the statement said. The statement did not specifically mention China, but comes amid simmering tension between Beijing and Washington and its allies over the disputed South China Sea. Taiwan's foreign ministry welcomed the expression of concern. Taiwan will cooperate with the United States, Japan, South Korea, and other like minded partners to ensure peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, in other words, in the relationships between Taiwan and Communist China, and Indo-Pacific Ministry spokesman Xiao Guang Wei told reporters in Taipei. China claims almost the entire South China Sea, that's the nine dash line, overlapping the exclusive economic zones of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines and Vietnam. Unresolved disputes have festered for years over ownership of various islands and features. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, South Korean Foreign Minister, and these all the people also discussed the three countries' continued commitment to end North Korea's nuclear program. And here they go off the rails of minimum rationality, I think. You know, and I guess it's I guess in diplomacy you sort of have things that you have to say, even if you know that they're completely irrational. Um, but and, unless they're going to say that denuclearization is a code word for regime change in North Korea, then if they just tell me that, then I'll say, okay, I understand now. But they just keep talking, oh yeah, we have, in fact, what is it? Lee Jae-myung, the South Korean president, has this three-stage process, he says, that he can bring about denuclearization in North Korea. I hope no one is in Washington is taking that seriously. Um, First of all, Lee Jae-myung is, I'm sure, does not intend to bring about denuclearization in North Korea. I think he's probably one of those people who says, hey, once we're united, those nuclear weapons will be our nuclear weapons, I suspect. Uh, China, which views the democratically governed island as its own territory, we're talking about Taiwan again, has stepped up its military activities nearby, including staging war games. Taiwan's government rejects China's territorial claims, of course. Yes. All right. So they talked about it, and I don't know what they actually intend to do about it. Um, but the relationship between Taiwan, United States, and Japan, Taiwan, Japan, and to some extent Taiwan, South Korea needs to be strengthened. That's for sure. I think that is the lifeline that Taiwan hangs on right now. And if that is severed or if that is weakened, then Taiwan will be in serious trouble. All right. So we did that one. This is interesting. Not sure what it's about, but anyway, it's interesting. So let's take a look at it. So first of all, RWA, if that's a if that is a if that is an abbreviation you're familiar with, you're probably under 40 years old. I think RWA, or unless you have a finance background. Okay. But now more and more people are talking about real world assets. Of course, real world assets. What assets are not real world, right? But yeah, you have cryptocurrency, and you have then the stuff that you can actually touch and hold and step on and dig and stuff like that. or grow in the ground, real world assets. Now, China asks brokers to pause the real world asset business in Hong Kong. So, what is the real world asset business? My tongue doesn't quite go around with that. Let me put this back up. But the financial structure of the world is changing, and it's changing very, very quickly. So we need to somehow, you know, keep up with it. China's security watchdog has advised some local brokerages to pause their real world asset or RWA tokenization business. So now we have something new. We not only have RWAs, we're going to tokenize them. Business in Hong Kong said two sources signaling Beijing's concern of a euphoric drive towards a booming digital assets market offshore. Offshore. Now you may be saying, wait a second, these are real world assets, but then we're talking about digital assets. So what's the connection? Okay. RWA tokenization process usually converts traditional assets such as stocks, bonds, funds, and even real estate into digital tokens traded on a blockchain. A raft of Chinese firms, including brokerages, have launched RWAs in Hong Kong over the past few months. So, and I'm not completely comfortable talking about RWA, in a tokenization yet, but I'm guessing it's this way. And if someone knows more about it, go ahead and put something in the comments. So you got a piece of land. Let's say you own a piece of land, and uh, you tokenize it. And the advantage there is that a token can be subdivided potentially infinitely. So you can sell a small portion of your land, right? You can sell 1/100th, 1/1000th, or Bitcoin, for example, is subdivided into 100 million pieces. So potentially even 100 million. Let's say you have a piece of land in Midtown Manhattan. You've got a skyscraper standing on it, and the value is many hundreds of billions of dollars. And so then I guess you can tokenize it. You can make a token of it, and then you can put that on a or send it to a brokerage or put it on an exchange someplace, and someone can buy let's say 100 millionth of that, let's say $500 billion asset, something like that, which a lot of people can't afford. And maybe that's what's going on here. And it's on a blockchain, uh, so that it's immutable. But now, a lot of blockchain experts have said that the only time you want to use a blockchain is when you have a distributed database. A distributed database is where you have a situation where, um, well, a distributed ledger, I'm sorry, distributed ledger. A ledger, for example, is very simply, you sign into your bank account, right? And then you see a ledger. You, you see a list of expenses and the deposits, and that's a ledger. And you have a running balance on the side. That's a ledger. But that ledger is only held by the bank, right? So that's not a distributed ledger. A distributed ledger is where you have multiple people holding the same ledger. And again, Bitcoin is an example of that. In the case of Bitcoin, you have tens of thousands of computers around the world communicating with each other, keeping track of every transaction, and uh, creating and holding a identical copy of the Bitcoin ledger. In other words, a copy of all the transactions that have occurred since the beginning of Bitcoin until now. And these tens of thousands of computers around the world uh, have a copy of that. It's all the same. They're the same copies. And if there's a difference, then there's a way um, to take care of that difference so that everything is the same. It's all matched up. But in this case, um, you know, these digitized RWA tokens don't seem to be sort of on a distributed ledger network. Rather, if it's going to be on a single ledger, then um, blockchain experts say that in that case, just have a regular database. You don't need a blockchain because blockchains actually are slow, slower than the regular database, right? Because you got to go through the process of making sure that everybody's got the same uh, list of transactions in the same order, same transaction in the same order, continuing all the however many thousands of transactions that are going on, they have to be on this ledger in the same way. So it's a little bit slow. Um, but they talk about this being on a blockchain, and it may be that blockchain sort of is a buzzword right now, so people don't know what it means, but they say, okay, well, yeah, that's if it's on a blockchain, then I guess it's nice, it's good. Well, maybe what they look for in a blockchain is that it is immutable, where it becomes immutable. But even that, I think, uh, maybe not really the right way to look at it. Anyway, I suppose these people know what they're doing. A raft of Chinese firms, okay, including brokerages, have launched RWAs in Hong Kong over the past few months. At least two leading brokerages have received informal guidance from the China Securities Regulatory Commission in recent weeks to refrain from conducting RWA business offshore, said the sources with knowledge of the matter. One of the sources said the latest regulatory guidance is aimed at strengthening risk management of a new business, making sure that claims made by companies are backed by strong, legitimate businesses. In other words, making sure that they don't threaten the power of the Chinese Communist Party, right? And remember, that's what it always boils down to in China, the power of the Chinese Communist Party. Okay? And that is related to I'm not sharing this with you, okay? And that's related to stability in society. So they don't want these businesses to start and then create instability in the financial markets, which would then spill over into instability in society, and who knows, maybe even cause a rebellion against the Chinese Communist Party. Certainly don't want that. So got to be very careful with these new businesses, right? And in fact, China um, outlawed Bitcoin. I'm not sure exactly what aspect of it, or is it the ownership, is it the use? But anyway, when they did that, a lot of Bitcoin miners ran away from China, moved to other places like Texas, like El Salvador, et cetera. But now China accounts for a very hefty chunk of the Bitcoin mining in the world. So someone in China is making a lot of money there, probably the Chinese Communist Party. So anyway, strengthening risk management for the Chinese Communist Party. Shares in top Chinese brokerages listed in Hong Kong went down. Okay. The move comes as Hong Kong over the past year ramped up efforts to position the Asian financial center as the digital asset hub, with many firms, including Chinese brokerages, preparing for the launch of virtual asset trading, investment, advisory, and virtual asset management. China, once the biggest Bitcoin trading and mining center, on the other hand, has taken a cautious approach towards digital assets after it banned cryptocurrency trading and mining in 2021 due to financial system stability concerns. But actually, anyway, um, that's true. They did in 2021, but 4 years later, someone in China is doing a lot of mining. Okay. And well, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Well, it's because they looked at Bitcoin at first and say, hey, we can control this and then we can rule the world, sort of. But then they realized, wait a second, I don't think we can control this. And wait a second, this is going to actually undermine our ability to control our own economy. We better get rid of it. So that's what they did. Yeah. Um, I'm a, I think something curious is going on where, in terms of President Trump pushing Bitcoin, because if you look at Bitcoin, and I'm not giving financial advice, all right, but if you look at Bitcoin, you come to see that it if Bitcoin succeeds, it will separate money from state. Uh, it will deny the state the ability to print as much money as they want, to create as much money as they want, in order to fund wars, to fund all sorts of social programs meant to, you know, um, pay off certain portions of the population so that they vote certain ways. They won't be able to do any of that. And so uh, some people who look at Bitcoin are saying at some point the government is going to crush this. Now, I'll leave it up to you to, if you're interested in this kind of thing, to study Bitcoin yourself, to look and see whether that is actually possible at this point. It would definitely have been possible when Bitcoin first began. It would definitely have been possible then. But is it still possible today? And will it be possible in the future? I think that's an interesting question that, if you're interested in this kind of thing, you need to explore it before you decide what um, role Bitcoin may or may not play in your portfolio. Big word there. All right. And I'm not giving financial advice at all. Just pointing out, just pointing out this thing. Okay. All right. So um, let's see. Oh my goodness, we're way over time. I see. Is that what the tech team was trying to tell me? Well, you guys should have just broken in and told me to stop. All right, way over time today. So I guess you get a bonus 12 minutes today. God bless Godspeed. Is that really what time it is? I guess it is. All right. God bless Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly. See you tomorrow.